Focus on the plot, find the journey, follow the arc, and maybe when you step out of the world, you might find something real. Hi, welcome to the Book Corner with me, Mish Atagana. Let's discover new worlds together. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Book Corner with me, Mish Atagana. Today, as you can see, I'm alone. I know a few of my episodes this season so far has had a co-host with me, but today we are back to original setting, to our factory setting, and we are talking about two books today. The first book I want to talk about today with you guys is called Female Fantasy by Iman Hariri-Kia. I hope I said her last name correctly. But I remember Roshni. Guys, remember I mentioned Roshni before. So Roshni is my colleague based in the UK. She was reading this book and I saw it. I was like, oh, that looks interesting. And she's like, I think you'll like it. You should read it. And this is actually a book where I did a mix of Kindle and audio while I was doing this one. So it was super interesting. It's literally, so the notes I kind of wrote for this episode is like, a book that sits right in the space between fan fiction, yearning, and searching for something real. And that's really what the story kind of sets us off into. I remember, I think, when I read the premise for it, I was like, this I gotta see. And my whole thing about this, and when I described it to someone, it felt like reading two books at once, right? So it felt like we're reading the book of our main character, Joonie, who is reading a book that we're also getting kind of drawn into. She is a fan of romance, and she loves to read the romance genre. And she got introduced to the series, which is a romantasy. So she gets like stuck into this world of romantasy. This is kind of like a story that looks like at the distance between fantasy, and it's like not like generally like fantasy in the plane where you look at fantasy, but fantasy we fall in love with and the reality we live in. So it's funny, it's chaotic. It is so chaotic. When I say a book is chaotic, this book is chaotic. Remember how unhinged Tress of the Emerald Sea was? Still the most unhinged book I've ever read. This is like this chaos, like, theme runs through this book as well. It's also honest and is deeply reflective. Like when we meet Joonie, she's not delusional about who she is and what is happening in the story. She's very self-reflective. And I think the story itself is super self-reflective. So today we're going to focus a lot on the plot. We're going to look at the journey, the arc, and I will also kind of talk to you guys just a little bit. So it'll be a little bit different again, because this whole season has been very question and answer based. But this, I'm going to try and take you guys through the way the book moves, almost like a scene by scene state. So, but like I said, we're talking about two books. So the first book is Female Fantasy, and then we're going to talk about Naomi Novik's Uprooted a little later. So in Female Fantasy, our main character is Joonie. She is tired. She's underpaid. She lives in Mystic. So if you ever watched Mystic Pizza, she lives in Mystic. And she's a copywriter, and she really comes alive when she's writing fan fiction. Entire emotional landscape really revolves around the romantasy series, and its hero Reich. And not just any hero. He's like a merman warrior. So literally underwater, he's brooding, he's intense, he's perfect, essentially. And Joonie's real life relationships just can't seem to compete. Every man she meets is compared to Reich, and none of them stands a chance. How can you? You're talking about a merman who is a warrior, and he's like, the way they describe it. Because when I felt like I was also reading his story. It felt so intense. Like he's like this. He's got like this intense gaze. Like he looks at you like you are the world, or he looks at you like he is in the desert and you are the only water and he is thirsty. Like imagine that kind of gaze, and for her, like, it's like the foundation. This kind of is the foundation of the story. So I think we begin with like this insane Reich thing, and then we meet Joonie, and it's how entire journey with her really revolved around this. And she literally is a woman that has used fantasy both as a solace and as armor. So a safe world that she can control. And as someone who's a huge fan of fantasy who reads fantasy, I really related with this book. Not in the sense that I'm comparing every man I meet to my many book boyfriends, but in the sense that I can understand what it means to find safety and solace in a world that is so perfectly well built and sculpted. And if I kind of, so that's kind of like our stage setting, right? Is we meet Joonie, underpaid copywriter. She's unlucky in love. She is she's finding solace in these fantasy books, and she's comparing every man she ever meets to this Reich character. That's our stage. Then our catalyst is like everything kind of shifts when Joonie finds out that Reich is inspired by a real life man in the world. So what does what does our little Joonie do? Joonie gets in a car and decides to go drive and find said man. So it literally, this really cracks open everything because like if the fantasy is kind of rooted in reality, then maybe fantasy itself can be found. And that's kind of the question Joonie asks herself. Like if the character, if the perfect man of this story is based on a real man in real life, maybe the fantasy can be found in reality. And I think that's a question a lot of people ask themselves. Like, there's like there's a whole discussion, that people go, do you kind of forget that the world exists, and do you begin to think that the things of reality or the things that you read about in the fantasy worlds you live in your head, they become reality and the edges of reality blur. And here is a classic case where a reader who is a smart reader, because Joonie is a smart reader. She is super smart. She understands the difference between her fantasy world and reality. But the moment she learns that there is a possibility that the fantasy can too be real, she wants to take it. And I think that's really, really interesting. So obviously she makes this dramatic decision to go find this person. And there's a second character that enters, which is her brother's best friend, who's attractive, annoying, and super practical. And a complete contrast to Joonie's dreamer's heart. He agrees to drive across country with her on a road trip to go find this man. And this is like really become the spine of our plot, because when you kind of look at the road trip arc, and I really love the road trip arc in the story, because this part of the book is where the story really opens up. It's super messy, it's fast paced, it's filled with details. Like really, like for me, the important plot beats here are like visiting her online fanfic friend. So she takes a step to kind of step away from, because Joonie also she lives a little bit of an isolationist life. The people she knows are the people she knows, and her online friends are her truest friends she's never met, and they don't really know some of the things that in which she's kind of spiraling in her own life. So the road trip arc I love because it really creates a super messy space for Joonie where she gets to do this really quirky and chaotic thing. So visited our online friends is one of them that I thought it was. There's a lot of chaos on the road because the book throws a lot of wild moments, like misunderstanding, like a psychic gets involved. There's a near kidnapping. It's so humorous, and it's so revealing of the characters as these things happen. Like each chaotic moment kind of strips away layers of like Joonie's delusions and shows us who she really is without the filter of fantasy. And I quite like that. And then there's a kind of a slow shift of dynamic. With the second character here, where like as they travel and their banter kind of begins to soften, he also begins to respect her imagination. He begins to like see value in the ground and in her grounded nature. She begins to see value in his grounded nature and the relevance of romance. Like it's never the center, but it's the emotional tension that kind of just sits under every single scene in the story. And I also like the first cracks in the fantasy, we see it in the road trip. So like Joonie starts to worry, like, what if Reich is nothing like she's imagined? Mind you guys, Reich is not a real person. There's just like this other ordinary, perfectly okay man that Reich is based on. And Joonie is just like, if the person he's based on in real life exists, he must be the real Reich. So now she's starting to worry, like, what if he's not what he imagined? What if the real man cannot hold up to the weight of the world she has built, which no one can ever do? Like no person in the world can ever hold up to the weight of what you built for them. You have to give them grace that they will always crack under that pressure. So the road trip really is a transition, and the fantasy begins to collapse and we see reality begin to rise, which I really, really love. And then we kind of get to like our confrontation with reality, where Joonie really has to confront the reality that she's just kind of dealt with. And it peaks when we reach like this coastal town where Reich's real life character lives. Joonie finally meets him, and the moment is quiet. It's almost anticlimactic by design, and that makes sense because fantasy can never be real. That is why it is fantasy, right? Um, and then he's handsome, he's kind, he's human, and he's entirely human. That's it. He's not a super warrior merman who will stare at you with the gaze of 1,000 suns. No, you know, he's not the warrior. Like you said, it's not a door. There's no mythical virgin. There's nothing that she's expected. This emotional. This is like the real emotional heart of the book, I think, as well as kind of like where the fantasy dies without any dramatic blow. Like it dies quietly. And I love that. Like this is Imani writing here, and I'm calling her Iman. I'm sorry, Iman, because like her first name. Because when I posted about it, she was so gracious and so sweet. And in retrospect, I actually should have asked her if she wanted to be on this podcast. But it's fine. For next book, I'm so ready for it. And it's like it quietly dies, and it just simply dissolves and face reality. And I love like as a writer, she wasn't trying to defend the fantasy, but allowing reality to take its root and be where it needs to be. So I think Joonie has this breakdown, not because a man disappoints her, but because she realizes she has been hiding behind fantasy instead of facing our own desires and our own needs and our own fears. And we do that often, right? We hide from our own desires. Oh, I can't do this because of XYZ. Oh, I can't do this because I'm still struggling from this heartbreak. Or I'm still struggling for this one disappointment. Oh, I can't take this risk. And we hide in so much I can't and I won't and I don't know hows that we forget to go, I will try. I will see and I will understand. And if it fails, it will, and I will rise. And we forget to do a lot of that. And I really kind of like that about this book. I also like when we get to like when they get back home after this trip, I like that, she she rewrites her fan fiction and she begins to change it. So it becomes richer, so much more honest because she's grown as a person. And the better you grow as a person, the better a writer you will grow. You can kind of also see this as the author's actual journey as a writer and how rich and the learning, because there's a lot of question of oneself, and any young writer will do that. You will question your work even within the work. So we see a lot of this. We see how she kind of like makes a lot of space for imperfection, which I absolutely adored that. She examines her relationships. She stopped comparing real men to fictional ones, as we really should, but it's super hard. And she confronts her own feelings about the actual real man in her life who is both the dream and the reality. And I just love that. That also realization is not a grand myth. It's soft. It is human and it is earned. And I loved, love, love, love that. And like for me, like when I think about female fantasy, it's like it's a humorous premise to explore something super serious, the way in which fantasy comfort us, trap us in at the same time, and the way fiction becomes a mirror we sometimes want to hide behind. And that for me, like guys, you should read. Like I think if you like read books that are like super intense, sometimes a book like female fantasy is the palate cleanser that every reader needs. You need a little palate cleanser sometimes. A book like female fantasy for me is like a palate cleanser. So I want to talk to you guys about Uprooted. Uprooted is a bit darker. Would I call this like a dark book? So Uprooted by Naomi Novik. I first got introduced to this author by my lovely friend, Lauren. At the time, she was Lauren Granger. Now she's no longer Lauren Granger. She's Lauren Duval. I used to call her Miss Granger. Now I call her Miss Not Granger. So by Miss Not Granger, I was introduced to the series because she had the trilogy, which were like a dark academia about these kids in this school of magic. And actually, I have not done an episode on that series of hers. I actually think I should do an episode on that series. But I picked up Uprooted because I loved the premise. So it's about this girl who I'm struggling. This is actually a book I should listen to the audiobook because I just want to hear how they say the names, like the pronunciation of the names. I would love to see how they say it, but I'm going to butcher them because that's what I'm going to do. Agnieszka, I think that's her name, Agnieszka. I think that's how you say it. She lives in a quiet valley in Devnik, a village bordering a malevolent wood. I love a malevolent wood. Guys, how many times have you read a book about a malevolent wood and you just know the villain is not what they seem? Like I love a villain that's like, oh, so I read the North Wind books, the wind, I call them the wind books. So North Wind, West Wind, and I think South Wind. I haven't read South Wind, but it's out. And I think then there's the East Wind. I think that's the final, like, yeah. I haven't read the last two, I've read the first two. So, but I love a book about like a malevolent wood, like this place or this dark castle that you can't go into. But then you find out actually the villain is not what it seems. This is what this book is about. So, spoiler alert: the villain is not what the villain seems. So it's like a sentient forest, which is also even better, like a forest that has sentience. Ooh, exciting. It is, and it corrupts everything it touches. Like, can you imagine that? A forest that is sentient and corrupts everything it touches. Of course, it's a malevolent wood. The wood is going to kill you, essentially. The woods are going to kill you. So every 10 years, the dragon, a powerful, aloof wizard who protects the valley, chooses one young woman to serve him in his tower. The villagers believe he takes them to for a mysterious purpose, but the truth is that he simply requires a maidservant and an assistant. Still, the chosen girl always returns unchanged, distant, and never stays in the valley. So now everybody's afraid to get chosen by the dragon because they don't know, like, what's going to happen and all of that. So everybody also expects the dragon to choose a specific person every year. So they expect the dragon to choose Cassia. He does not. Agnieszka she's graceful, she's talented, like she's Cassia's best friend. Instead, he selects her, sensing her deep, raw magical potential. She's taken to the tower, frightened and unprepared, but the dragon soon realizes she possesses an innate, untamed magic, unlike the rigid spells he teaches. And I think for me, this is where this book really kicks off, when he learns like about her magic and the way in which, like, she's not even aware. Like, this is just like the super amazing girl that now she gets chosen by the dragon, and her whole thing is like, how am I going to escape? How am I going to fix this? But she begins to also learn a little bit about herself. So like some of the themes, so I wrote down here, like in terms of like the thematic analysis when I was thinking about the book, is like, the wood is not merely an antagonist in this, right? So yes, it is a sentient wood that has like, nefarious things, but it's kind of like a metaphor for unresolved harm, because it really is, the wood is generational trauma. Like, the more I read it, I was just like, ooh, this is like generations of trauma, like, here. So it's about unresolved harm. It embodies like the violence that kind of festers, like when injustice is buried, which is a lot of, so again, uprooted, so that corruption tends to spread because its origins were never acknowledged. And her magic works because she recognizes that healing requires witnessing, not dominant, not dominating. And I quite like that. Like, she's very she's so unassuming. Like, she doesn't realize the power of the things she's doing, which is so interesting. There's also things around instinct and discipline. So, because again, the dragon is about teaching spells, and he's like, okay, you have innate power, let me teach you. And we find that her intuitive magic sharply contracts like his structured approach. Like, he's like, these are the rules, this is what the book says, this is how we do it. And she's just like, no, I'm just gonna like hope for the best. Like, when I need it, the magic will show up and like protect. It will listen, it will adapt, it will do its thing, it will bend, right? And boy, for him, that kind of breaks his brain. He doesn't understand. And then I also like the idea of like female solidarity that comes into play here, because her and Cassia's bond really is the true center of this novel when I think about it, because their magic only works fully when it's cast together, because Cassia also has magic. And that's the thing. He also chooses women that has some sort of innate magic. But it only works when it's together, which symbolizes like there's almost interdependence, there's loyalty, there's quiet strength of women who choose one another through fear and triumph. And I really, really love that. I remember like this book took me a while to read, I won't lie. Not because it's a difficult read, it's not. It took me a while to read because I kept sensing like pieces of what I wanted out of female friendships, what I wanted out of female bonds in this. And that was just like really great. There's like a lot about power and corruption here as well, guys. Like, the court's obsession with politics, lineage, reputation that kind of blinds the real danger. like power without humility becomes a rot. Mirroring like the wood, and the wood really is like, guys, when I say this wood is, whoa, the wood is bad. It's just bad. Like Agnieszka breaks the cycle by literally choosing honesty, compassion over force. And it's so funny because I always have this conversation when I say to people, like meet people for the first time, or like if I'm talking to someone, I always say to them, you don't ever need to lie to me. Like there's no need. And I feel like I would get on with Agnes because of this, because we'd just be like, we don't ever need to lie to each other. Like it's fine. Um, so like what I like the characters for me are super, they're so central. This is a character. The story is really driven by the characters. Like Agnieszka, as I said, like she's messy, stubborn, instinctive. She's like a witch who draws magic from intuition and emotion. She grows from anxious village girl into the only person capable of seeing the wood's true nature. Like her strength is super empathetic and is wrapped in fierce loyalty. And then you have the dragon, our supposed villain. He's abrupt, he's brilliant, but he's repressed. His magic is like precision, is structure. Agnieszka forces him to vulnerability, which he fears terribly, teaching him that power means connection rather than distance. And his arc is like one of loosening, softening, and just learning to trust. And I also really love to see that. Kessia, like literally the steel behind Agnieszka's fire. Like this girl is a survivor. Like she survives corruption through sheer will. She emerges stronger. Her bravery and quiet depth just kind of reshapes the dynamic of the story in such a beautiful way. She's not a victim. She's not. She is not a victim. She's a reckoning. Like when you see her coming, she is vengeance incarnate, and she will bring a reckoning to you. And I love that. Um, there's other characters here as well that we want to look at that really shape the story. So Prince Marek, who's like the ruler of this place, he's a bad dude. He's impulsive. He's arrogant. He's shaped by unresolved grief. His need for glory, for revenge becomes like it's catastrophic. I think he reflects how trauma, when unaddressed, turns into violence, and it is bad, especially when you have so much power. It is such a problem. And then we kind of have like what I call the real villain, which is like the wood, or and the queen of the wood actually. So this is the origin of the wood's corruption, a symbol of like wounded power that calcifies into destruction. Her story warns of what happens when ambition overtakes humanity. And this is really like when I look at the whole story of Uprooted, is really about this corruption layer, and when humanity fails to kind of gatekeep this corruption. I think like for me, I think when I read the first trilogy of Naomi Novik, there was super intense reads, but really good. I hadn't like kind of gotten into any of her other stuff, and I saw a lot of people talking about Uprooted online and just how good it was, and it really, really is good. You know, and Robin Hobb described this book as enchanting in every sense. It does. It enchants you. It captures you, and you want to be involved. You want to understand. You want to go deeper. Um, this is I actually wrote a little poem about this book. Can I read my little poem, guys? So I wrote a little poem and I was like, the forest is hungry tonight, not for flesh, but for memory. For the softest part of you, a part that still believes the world is kind. A girl walks into the dragon's tower with dirt under her fingernails and magic she does not yet know how to name. Beyond the valley, the wood stirs, ancient grief shifting in its roots. Something old remembers her name, something broken waits to be healed. And this is how a witch is born. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode, on the solo episode of the Book Corner. I hope you enjoyed it. I really recommend Uprooted. I think you guys should read it. But if you've read it and have thoughts about this episode, please find me, Globemish, Instagram, TikTok. I'm there. I will read, I will respond, and I will discuss. See you next time. And we out.